Yeah, no, it's super crazy right now. We're getting ready for everything to really get started. And we're in kind of like the last home stretch of home training before we head out to our pre-Olympic camp. My coach and one of my training partners and my athletic trainer are all going to be going to Sweden for our pre-Olympic camp this year, which we're pretty excited about. I think it'll be really good and a nice opportunity to get into Europe, get used to the time change, get used to the food, get used to the weather, and everything else that you may have to, that may be a little bit different than home when preparing for the Olympic Games. So that's kind of what we're doing. And we leave next Saturday on the 20th. So things are really wrapping up here quickly. I almost want to start packing. I'm so excited. Oh my gosh, I feel like so much has changed. So much that it's almost crazy for me to look back on Tokyo because as you said, it was a different time, but I also feel like I was in just such a different stage in my athletic career. I feel like in the 3 years, and it's only been 3 years, and in the 3 years since Tokyo, I feel as if I've grown and learned so much more about who I am as an athlete and as a person. My coach and I have really started to figure out even more of like the finer details into, how my mindset works in major competitions and championships and what works and what doesn't work when training and looking at, seasons, years in advance. And so when I reflect on Tokyo, I can't help but be super duper happy with how things went, of course, since, I was the youngest finalist, I think, ever in the women's hammer throw, and to be, I think it was the first Canadian woman to make a final in the hammer throw. It's an honor, truly. And so with all of that said, I think I was still very young. Like, I remember going into the final and being like, what am I doing here? What am I doing here? And even leading up to the games, I feel like I was really battling with a little bit of imposter syndrome just because it was kind of this whole new world that I was being introduced to from being in the NCAA, which of course is such a huge sort of, it's a total league of its own to be in with some of the best athletes in the world competing there. But I suddenly, you're at the Olympics, and very few things can prepare you for competing at the Olympics, like just competing at the Olympics or even competing at Worlds and those high level championships. And so going into Tokyo, I felt very young for sure, but I also just felt like you're kind of learning as we went. And now to be in a position where I'm preparing for Paris now, it feels very different. But I also think that some things have stayed the same. And it's kind of nice to see sort of the things that change, but also the things that I know we're doing well and have continued to do well over the last couple of years, such as the way that my coach and I, plan out our years. Like early on before the season even starts. Like I have about 2-3 weeks off between seasons. And so in those few weeks, we're already planning for the next year. And so to know that the planning that we do, that is on point, that it's month to month, week to week, day by day, that we're doing that very well to prepare for major competitions, that the way that we can peak for certain competitions has been very good. And so to learn from maybe the mistakes that we made in the past, but to also know that what it is that we've done really well has really sort of come together to, I think, prepare me for a really, really good Olympic Games this year. And I'm very excited to be there. I know everyone else is as well. So it'll be like a battle to the end for sure once the competition hits, but that's exactly what we're preparing for. Oh, man. I mean, okay, what I will say is I think that the Japanese Olympic Committee did everything within their power to make it an incredible Olympic Games. And to that, I'm super thankful. I think they did an amazing job with the planning. I think the volunteers that were there in the village and at the actual competition venues were so lovely, so sweet and kind. And I definitely had an amazing time. There was delicious food, so that was all good. We had a super fun time. And I remember walking into the dining hall like the first day that I was in the village, and you have to like scan your little ID card to get into the dining hall. And so once I got in there, it was like a 2-story building. There were a couple of them actually. One of them was smaller and it was kind of off to the side, but it had a lot more like traditional Japanese food, and that was super tasty. But it also had a major, like the main dining hall, more kind of like in the center-ish of the village. And that's pretty much where a lot of people would go to eat because it was open like earlier and then would stay open later. So I walked in and I will never forget walking between tables and just recognizing so many people that I had never met before, but I had seen because they were all like Olympic champions and world champions and like world record holders and national champions. And I was like, what is going on? This is insane. Like, this is crazy. But it was also so cool to know that we were all there in the same place fighting for the same thing. And it was this really amazing moment. I think first off of me just kind of realizing like, oh my gosh, like we're here, like I'm here, we're doing this thing, but also kind of like oh my God, this is real, this is happening. Yeah, it was a big mix, but I think when looking back at the village and day-to-day life, I mean, there's so much that goes into not just making it to the game. So once you're there, like preparing for it day by day, especially I think in the week leading up to a major championship like the Olympic Games. And so we would go train. I think we had to cut back on our practices. So we were doing 1 throwing session a day and then 1 lifting session a day, as opposed to 2 throwing and 1 lifting. So we would go, so my coach and I would go and we would practice, and it was super fun because then you would get to see like all of the other hammer throwers there at the cage, at the ring during our training time. So that's where I saw the world record holder for the first time and tried really hard not to fangirl to her face. So that was great. But we went and we would throw and then we would lift, and you know, you're trying to kind of make things as normal as possible and not get super overwhelmed with how crazy all of the little details are, like seeing all these people around you and knowing that I think there were maybe like a couple fewer things that we had to do in the village compared to previous ones because of COVID, but like you could go and like decorate your phone cases that you were given and go to like a souvenir shop, and they had these like internet cafes where you would go meet people in the game room. And it was, for us, very much try to keep things as normal as possible. And at the time I was also taking an online class during the summer for university, so it wasn't super duper hard to keep things normal, which I think was nice as like an easier transition. But so I guess woohoo to taking calculus during the Olympics, but it was a really fun experience. And now looking forward to Paris and knowing that there will be more to do, I think that we're going to try to keep things as similar as possible as we do here, keep it as simple and straightforward as we can, and really try to enjoy a lot of the other things after I'm done competing, because the whole reason that we're going there is to compete and fight for a podium finish and to get as high up on that podium as I can. And so it's just making sure that you stay disciplined and focused throughout the entire experience until you can really have the time to, I guess, enjoy every other aspect of being in the Olympic Games afterwards, which will be very nice with my family because they're going, which is going to be amazing. So I can't wait to see them there. I can't wait for them to be there. Another big difference from Tokyo. So I think for me, the downtime was very much consumed by my schoolwork, and also because at the time, like we couldn't really leave the village to go explore the city since the city at the time was on lockdown. So it was a totally like special circumstance kind of, I think, situation to be in the Olympic Village in Tokyo. So I think the one time that I had actually left the village to go do something was to go watch the men's hammer throw final the day after the women's hammer throw final, which was super fun. Had an awesome time. Loved it. But besides that, it was kind of staying in the village, definitely staying masked up, especially around all the other countries once we left our dorms, because the way that the village works is that there are countries, like all the countries have sort of they're all split up into different buildings throughout the village. So Team USA, because they're such a huge team, has like their own building. I think Team Canada, ooh, who were we in our building with? We were in our building with, I think, 2 other countries, and I'm really trying to remember what they were off the top of my head, but I can't remember at the moment. But it was super fun because I got to see athletes from all the different sports in our building, since countries would stay together, which I thought was super cool. So I got to meet, I think, some of our Canadian basketball players. Oh my gosh, who else? I sounded like cyclists. It was awesome. And so and then the buildings from there, you would have like suites and like the different bedrooms. So you would get roomed with somebody. I think the way it worked out was because there were a couple kind of switch arounds with the competition schedules and people going into different rooms. I kind of ended up with my own room, which was a little bit nice at my first Olympics. So kind of got lucky in that regard. But I would just kind of sit. I would watch some TV shows, obviously Parks and Rec, because Parks and Rec is the best. And try to like FaceTime my friends, and I would like walk around the village and show them. And it was just so cool, especially my parents, because I don't think family is allowed in the village, or like any like outsiders, like non-athletes, not coaches, team personnel. But I would FaceTime them and walk around, especially since they couldn't be there. So I had a really cool experience, just kind of like being able to show friends and family what it was like there, and then in the stadium during the walkthrough as well, because you're allowed to do a walkthrough of the competition stadium before you actually go compete there, which was crazy to walk out and just like see the rings. Like it kind of makes everything so much more real when you walk out onto the actual track and like into the circle for me. Sorry about the word. And and realize that like, oh my gosh, you're here. Even though we're no spectators during the actual competition. It was like a very quiet competition, but I think that's going to be one of the big things I look forward to this year as being very different, especially since Petro-Canada is supporting family to like, I think it's like 2 tickets per athlete for each of your competition times to go to the Olympics. Like Olympic tickets are expensive, and so knowing that my family not only like gets to go but gets to have that kind of like support behind them is going to be amazing, because I have a lot of friends and family who are coming because they didn't get to last time. So that's going to be an amazing experience to like look up into the stands and actually see them, and to know that they're like here, they're cheering for me. I have my parents, we have cousins flying up from New Zealand. One of my best friends is coming up from California as well. We have friends from home that are coming, so it's going to be a whole like cheer section. If you see like 20 people wearing Team Canada shirts, you know you know who that squad is. So you can bring whatever you'd like, and I know a ton of people who especially brought their own pillows. But I think contrary to what a lot of people believe about the beds, because there was so many like opinions about the cardboard beds in Tokyo, and they're having like the same beds in Paris as well. Not enough people know how comfortable those beds were, and I think they were. I think in the same building that they had a lot of like the games rooms that you could do for all the athletes and stuff. I think they had like a little area set up where you could go talk to the people who actually like made the mattresses and like buy one, because they were so comfortable. I was this close to buying the actual Olympic bed, but it was super comfortable, super nice, very sturdy as well, which I think was very surprising, but a very happy surprise. But a lot of people brought their own stuff, which I think is a good idea. I think I'm going to bring my own pillow, especially because that's a nice like silk covering, which is very fancy. So I might do that it's something you're used to. And I think one of the most important things for any competition that you do is trying to make things as normal as possible, or as close to your normal as you can get. So even if it's as simple as like bringing your own pillow, which I have done before going to Europe, it makes a big difference, especially when you know that sleep is such a big, important part and factor into performance. So you will find me bringing my own ginormous silk covered pillow to Paris with me. A really cool thing was, I don't know if they've done this in previous games. I assume that they did, but in Tokyo, and I've seen them preparing to do the same thing in Paris. They have not personalized, but like a games specific blanket, like duvet that they have on each bed. So in Tokyo, it was this really beautiful blue duvet that said Tokyo 2020 on the bottom of it. And I think if you were in like the last week of the Olympic Games schedule, since it's 2 weeks and track's always in the second week, except for LA in 2028, they're switching it around. Very fancy. But in Tokyo, since track's like was in the second week of the program, and if you were going to be one of the last people in your room, they were like, take the blanket. And so I took the blanket. So I have my Tokyo 2020 blanket. And so they're going to do the same thing in Paris, which I think is so fun and like cool way to kind of have something sort of special to remember your time by that people can't buy. Like you can't get that at a souvenir shop. And so I definitely, if I'm allowed to, I'm taking my Paris blanket. I am shoving it into my suitcase. I will ship it home if I have to. But I think it's just really fun and really cool and like a very special way to sort of remember each games by that you go to. So I don't know if they had it in previous games, like I said, but the fact that they had it in Tokyo and now in Paris, I think is very cool. So that was like a little fun thing.